So much happened in the news this week, it's kind of hard to know where to begin, but the Roundtable is going to figure it out. We've got a good one for you, as always. Tim Padgett is here, America's correspondent for WLRN, Miami Herald News, National Public Radio in South Florida. He specializes in Latin America and the Caribbean. Marili Cancio is an attorney with her own firm in Miami. She is an influential voice in the Republican Party. Rafael Yaniz is a political analyst and an attorney in Miami. Comes at things, I would say, from sort of the center-right most of the time. Not trying to pigeonhole you, however. Good morning. Great to have you all in.
Great to be here.
We miss Glenna.
Yeah, well, I miss her too.
Yes.
I hope she stays warm over there. She's
Well,
having
Lots of
fun.
sunshine for you, Glenna.
She will be back next Sunday. Tim Padgett, let me begin. I want to hear from you all, but you know, recognizing Juan Guaido in the gallery, as we saw earlier, at the State of the Union, hailing him as the legitimate president of Venezuela, and then promising to bring down Maduro. Is this just sort of lip service by the president, or are there things that the administration can still do that really would end the Maduro regime?
Well, this was an essential moment for Juan Guaido. Before that night, he was on a 2-week world tour to try to revive his opposition movement
Right,
to
it had
oust.
been 1 year.
It had been 1 year anniversary. This is
Yeah.
sort of his anniversary world tour to jumpstart this movement of his to oust the authoritarian president in Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. And ending it here in Miami, it was essential for him, as I said, to have this endorsement by President Trump on this high-profile stage to remind the world that the U.S. still backs him, because there had been some doubts about whether President Trump was still enthusiastic about Juan Guaido and this movement in general, because it hadn't produced the immediate results of overthrow of the regime in Venezuela that he wanted.
Well, the president had come, Marili, as we know, nearly a year ago, and had said all options are on the table, and I think a lot of the Venezuelan exile community in Weston and Doral and throughout South Florida and this country kind of thought, well, it's not maybe a military invasion, but he's really serious about it. It appears from what happened in Washington, the president is serious.
Absolutely. Not only was he the special guest on Tuesday, but the next day he received them in the White House with all the pomp and circumstance.
Right.
And then the following day, on Thursday, at the National Prayer Breakfast, again, he mentioned Guaido at the National Prayer Breakfast. So what we're seeing is Trump is showing 100% commitment to Guaido, because what's happening inside Venezuela, we have the Cuban government, the G2 forces spreading misinformation, trying to create doubt and divide the opposition, weakening Guaido. And what you're seeing here is a complete support of Guaido. And what's happening in Venezuela is going to happen by the Venezuelan people. Trump is not in the business of overthrowing or changing dictatorships. We're not going to go do an intervention there.
It's not regime change, but I think that there obviously, Rafael, are negotiations. Apparently, Mike Pompeo was asked about this. Are there negotiations underway to give him sort of a free exit so that Maduro could go to a third country without being prosecuted?
So U.S. government officials have hinted rather nakedly and openly through formal channels and informal channels that they are trying to find a negotiated exit for Maduro to go somewhere else, such as Panama, for example, or Colombia next door, which would be a little disastrous because of the proximity. However, we should give credit to U.S. Senator Marco Rubio and Rick Scott, who have been harping on this issue in private and in public with the administration. No matter how you feel about them or your party affiliation, they have made this a priority for the administration. That's why we're even discussing it today and this week.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. I think that part of the reason the president sort of put it back up at top priority level is probably because Marco Rubio and Rick Scott have been harping on this when they speak with him privately.
But in fairness, the Democrats have not shied away from it either. With the South Florida delegation very openly and aggressively supporting the Venezuelan freedom movement.
Donna Shalala and Debbie Mercosal-Powell, you know, have been there, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz as well.
And I think the Democrats are being borne out in their urging that we take a more realistic diplomatic path on this. This idea that we were going to oust Maduro and send him off to exile in Cuba in a matter of weeks was totally unrealistic. And I think what we're going to see this year is a more realistic, hardworking diplomatic path to get Maduro to agree to, for example, new presidential elections in which he might take part, in which he'd certainly lose. But we're going to have to do a lot harder diplomatic work.
Yeah. Rafael, and I'm sure you all saw this week, the New York Times fascinating big article inside which said that for the wealthy in Venezuela, life has gotten a lot better over the last month or two because, number one, they are allowing dollarization. The main currency apparently in Venezuela now are U.S. dollars, and Maduro has eased up on tariffs and all kinds of, I mean, there's more food, more life is getting, for people with money, life apparently in Caracas is not bad.
The problem is not that many people have money in Caracas or in the countryside in Venezuela. Cody Weddle for Channel 10 posted an amazing story online this week about Venezuelans in Colombia near border towns are using the worthless Venezuelan currency they manipulate the actual bills into purses and bags and other material goods that they're trying to sell to tourists from the United States and from
my
Europe.
friend sends her elderly mom, who's 80 years old and is very stubborn and lives there, shipments of boxes of canned food, and inside an empty box she puts like $100 in dollar bills because with $1 she can do a lot in Venezuela. So
correct.
It's
Still
terrible.
a desperate situation. All right. Hold your thoughts, everybody. Talk a little bit more about State of the Union when we come back with the Roundtable. Welcome back on this Sunday, a lively roundtable with Tim Padgett from WLRN, Marili Cancio, and Rafael Yaniz. Let's talk about sort of the substance and the appearance of the State of the Union speech. Marili, it was so well done, and it showed the power of this communicator. I mean, this guy really knows how to touch people, even though personally I thought it was frankly kind of offensive that Rush Limbaugh there in the gallery got a Presidential Medal of Freedom. I'm very sorry that he's got lung cancer. He did not look healthy. But this is somebody who, has made racist, xenophobic comments in the past. Don't want to concentrate on Rush Limbaugh, but that was sort of a downer.
Because if we go that way, we can talk about Weiner and Weinstein and others that have received that medal too. But I thought it was a beautiful night. I thought that speech was spectacular. I had people crying that day. I have a group text message of people that were not even Republicans before that are all excited about what's happening in this country, and they love the speech.
Yeah. Well, Tim, when you've got a little black girl from South Carolina where the mom who couldn't get into a school because she couldn't get a voucher, and suddenly she's going to get the scholarship to go to the school. I mean,
that story has turned out to be a little bit more complicated
really?
than what we thought. I won't go into here. It turns out she wasn't as impaired as we thought in her ability to get into the school. But going back to your point, though, there were some brilliant reality TV moments in that, and he's a
the
master
soldier
at that.
who
Yeah.
showed up, and the mother, the two little kids. Suddenly, here comes the
You have to
husband
give
in
it to him.
uniform.
He is a master at that sort of presidential theater.
Yeah. What did you think, Rafael?
I think he is a master communicator, as you have said. However, he and his team managed to keep him on message. He barely drifted from the teleprompter that evening. And at the end of the day, my Democratic friends were saying that they were disappointed with the Rush Limbaugh Presidential Medal of Freedom being handed down by the First Lady up in the gallery. It was a little disconcerting, really, that he used the State of the Union not to really talk about the State of the Union, but instead to turn it into a campaign launch pep rally in the U.S. House.
He did speak about the State of the Union, Rafael. Absolutely, he did. He talked about all the economic points that are facts, that are undisputed, how well the economy is doing.
Some of those facts, according to the Washington Post, some of them were exaggerated or overstated. But your point is a good one. The economy right now in this country and in the state of Florida,
it's superb,
is booming. It is really good, and it reminded, I think, anyone that if a Democrat is going to defeat Donald Trump in Florida, certainly they're going to have to address, the economy. And if it's not working for some people, who are the people, and what's your alternative?
But it makes you wonder why he felt it was so urgent then to again go after immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants, the way he did. If the economy is so great, why the urgency to go into those dog whistle, quasi-bigoted, quasi-racist accusations of undocumented immigrants as these ogres who steal our jobs and murder our citizens? That was a
Michael,
part of
if
the
we want to talk about
the
Florida,
address
we
that
have to
bothered
talk
me.
about the Puerto Rican community that's been displaced in Florida, and if they're going to be mobilized there, particularly along the I-4 corridor near Orlando. You have to talk about the Venezuelans who have been in this community now for almost 20 years, many of whom are now eligible to vote. Are they going to be mobilized? How are they going to vote? I mean, down here in South Florida, foreign politics is local politics.
That's right.
And so any Democrat who comes down here has to convince the local population, hey, the economy's great, I'm going to keep the engine going, but I want to address where the president is not meeting your needs.
Well, on that point, I thought it was fascinating that yesterday in Little Havana, Mike Bloomberg opened his third campaign office in the state of Miami. Could have put it anywhere, but he put it in Little Havana. I mean, Bloomberg, we've got some video here from the opening of this office, which was done, on a full budget. And there is Donna Shalala at that opening of that office. And Marili, that seems to me to be tacitly, implicitly, or maybe explicitly an endorsement by Shalala.
It certainly looks that way. What we're seeing is the Democratic establishment that has left Biden is now looking for an alternative. We know that they do not want to go with Sanders or with Elizabeth Warren, the radical left. So they're trying to find a replacement for establishment candidate.
Yeah. Well, I'm not speaking as partisan. I wouldn't say that Elizabeth Warren is part of the radical left. I mean, Bernie is a democratic socialist, but I don't know.
And Elizabeth Warren has plans that are completely unaffordable, so I think for me that's pretty radical.
Completely unrealizable.
I think it was
too.
very shrewd for him to open the office in Little Havana. I think if you're going to take on Trump in Florida, it's smart to take him on the Latino front. I mean, look at all the attention last week's Super Bowl halftime show got, not because it was Shakira and J-Lo, but because there was this effusion of Latino pride coming out of that show. Well, that's not going to beat Trump, but if you have a guy with billions of dollars who can come into Florida and get enough of that Latino vote away from Trump, again, as I said, that could be very shrewd.
Florida's still in play, and I think the most important inference that no one's talking about, the conspiracy theorists thinking Hillary Clinton's jumping in with Donna Shalala at a Bloomberg event, you can put those rumors to rest.
It's true.
You know, I will start speaking Farsi in the morning if Hillary Clinton gets into this
Well,
race.
there's
I mean,
conspiracy
just
theories
no way
online that she's coming in at the end, and Donna Shalala,
I don't
think
think
just
anymore.
disproved it.
Look, there are a
The
lot
new
of
rumor is it's now Michelle Obama. But I know
Check
it's not
in
going to
4
happen
years
either.
if Trump is reelected.
Well, we're in the weeds here. All right, everybody, we'll be back with more Roundtable in just a minute. Welcome back. A very robust roundtable on this Sunday. And let's talk a little bit about the debate on Friday night on ABC in New Hampshire. And Rafael, I thought among others that Amy Klobuchar, who really is good at this stuff, again, did extremely well, but it never reflects in her numbers. I mean, she 5th out of Iowa, and she, you know, I don't know what's going to happen Tuesday.
I told Marili and Tim, you know, in the conference room that last night's Saturday Night Live parody, Rachel Dratch, who's a phenomenal actress, nailed it on the head when they said, all right, wrap it up, candidates. And she, playing Amy Klobuchar, said, how am I not doing better? You know, she just yelled at the camera.
Yeah.
That's it.
Joe Biden struck me, Tim, as more assertive. Sometimes in these past debates, he looked like a bystander, somebody who wandered onto the stage and was hanging out. So he was more assertive. He had one, I thought, really good moment. I want to play this. This is where he started talking about Colonel Vindman and the Presidential Medal of Freedom for Rush Limbaugh. Let's listen.
Colonel Vindman got thrown out of the White House today, walked out. I think we should, and at the same time, he should be pinning a medal on Vindman and not on Rush Limbaugh. And I think what we should be doing now, I think we should all stand and give Colonel Vindman a show of how much we supported him. Stand up and clap for Vindman. Get up there.
I think that Iowa, New Hampshire are not particularly Joe's crowd. particularly, all that support we saw for Bernie Sanders in Iowa and in New Hampshire, for Pete Buttigieg. As we go along in the primaries, particularly when we get to states like South Carolina, where there's more of an African-American vote factor,
Right.
I
If
think
he can
Joe
get
is
to
going to
South Carolina, because he
Yeah.
is, I don't know, I didn't see the last reporting on, campaign accounting, but he had gone into New Hampshire with roughly $9 million versus Bernie, who had 20 million or something. Pete Buttigieg almost had 20. And Biden is running out of money. I mean, you can't even go to a state where people are disposed to like you if you can't be up on television.
No, and it makes you wonder why, as you said, Klobuchar isn't doing better, because she seems to bring that more pragmatic and energetic force to the campaign,
A
and at a
centrist.
younger age.
Yeah.
She's a
She's
true
59.
centrist. I have lobbied, full disclosure, I lobbied Senator Klobuchar in D.C. in her office with a team of young Cuban Americans about the Cuba issue when the Obama administration was trying to blow open the door and full engagement. And she gave us a crowd that wasn't necessarily in her camp. She gave us about almost 2 hours. And we spent a lot of time talking with her and showing her the details, and she cared about the nuances. And she shared a high level of candor as to why she had the position she had in support of engagement. And she indicated where she could bend and where she couldn't bend and the reasons why. So I deeply respect Amy Klobuchar. If the Democrats were to nominate her, I think she would be a tour de force for the Democrats. However, I want to get to the money that you were just bringing up with the campaigns. Michael Bloomberg's single ad buys in certain states dwarfs the full campaign budget of entire campaigns.
Right.
So they've spent $273 million, Bloomberg, $125 million Steyer, almost $500 million. Two candidates.
Yeah.
Steyer hasn't gone anywhere, hasn't gotten any traction.
He's not going anywhere.
He's not going to go anywhere.
Bloomberg-
but-
Bloomberg has
Bloomberg
the
is
name.
moving
up.
When Bloomberg spends that kind of money, it gets noticed. He has not only the name recognition, he is a mayor. And
Of
I
New
think
York.
we're forgetting the fact that the mayors are really the
Right.
have the cachet in this election cycle.
Well, and we know Manny Diaz, former mayor of Miami, is in his camp as a co-director of his campaign. Former mayor of Tampa has come out for him. Enid Weisman and Aventura.
The mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, and he's not even going to campaign in South Carolina.
Yeah. Well, I think he may prove to be a factor, Marili, in
I said
Florida
in the show
on-
that Biden wouldn't be the nominee.
On March 17th, if nobody else, if Sanders is leading coming into our primary after Super Tuesday, I think that Bloomberg has some kind of outside chance.
And Bloomberg has a huge chance with the superdelegates, especially if this is a broker convention. They don't get a nominee after the first
They're
round.
not getting a first-round nominee, but Michael
Exactly.
Giuliani in 2007, going into 2008, tried to do a Florida First campaign
Yes, he did.
and failed famously for it. Now we have Michael Bloomberg, who's not doing a Florida First. He's not putting all his eggs in this basket, but he is saying, I have enough money to go the distance.
Yeah. I'm afraid that is going to be it for this morning. Sorry we didn't get to parental consent, but we'll try that next week. All right. Thanks all for coming in.
Thank